I was 71 years old when my daughter sent a Mother Day group text that changed everything. The message was short, confident, and painfully familiar. She wrote that the family had chosen a restaurant for Mother Day dinner and that I would be paying for all 12 people, just like I always did. I stared at the screen for a few seconds, then smiled to myself in the quiet kitchen of the home my husband and I had bought more than 4 decades earlier. After years of saying yes, after years of being taken for granted, I finally answered with 4 words, "Enjoy, I am flying to Italy." The responses came immediately. My daughter Megan told me not to be dramatic. My son Ryan sent an eye roll emoji. My daughter-in-law Brooke added a thumbs down. They all assumed I was bluffing. After all, I had spent most of my life putting everyone else first. They believed I would show up like always, smile like always, and pay the bill like always. What none of them knew was that I had already packed my suitcase and made a decision that would change the rest of my life. A few months earlier, I had suffered a mild heart attack while grocery shopping. It was not severe enough to kill me, but it was serious enough to force me to look at my life honestly. While I was recovering in the hospital, my cardiologist asked a question no one had ever asked me before. He looked at my chart, listened to my history, and said something I could not stop thinking about. He asked when someone had last taken care of me. I had spent decades feeding people, helping people, supporting people, and solving problems for people. Yet I could not remember the last time anyone had truly shown concern for me. That question stayed with me long after I left the hospital. My husband Daniel had passed away years earlier, and since then I had slowly become invisible to my own family. I funded birthdays, hosted holidays, baked cakes, paid restaurant bills, and rescued everyone whenever they needed help. But when my birthday arrived, sometimes no one even remembered. I learned to tell myself it did not matter. Deep down, it did. Daniel and I had built something special together when we were young. Back in 1989, we opened an Italian restaurant that eventually became one of the most respected dining destinations in our city. We worked endless hours to make it successful. We sacrificed weekends, vacations, and sleep. We poured our hearts into every detail. Over the years, the restaurant grew into something bigger than either of us imagined. Yet as my children got older, they slowly disconnected themselves from that history. My daughter Megan became embarrassed by our background when she was a teenager. She preferred telling friends that I worked in hospitality rather than admitting I owned restaurants. By the time she graduated college, she acted as if our success had appeared out of nowhere. My son Ryan followed a similar path. He married into a wealthy family and gradually adopted their attitude toward status and appearances. Neither child ever asked about the sacrifices their father and I made to build the life they enjoyed. Then, 3 weeks before Mother's Day, everything changed. I received a call from Anthony, a chef I had mentored decades earlier. He had become enormously successful and now owned the restaurant Daniel and I founded. Anthony told me he wanted to buy my remaining ownership stake. The offer was worth over $4 million. During the same conversation, he revealed something else. I had been selected to receive a prestigious Lifetime Achievement honor from a major culinary organization. The announcement would become public a few days later. I sat in silence after that phone call. For years I had believed my best days were behind me. Suddenly, I realized they might still be ahead. Anthony also invited me to spend several months teaching at a culinary institute in Sicily. The opportunity felt impossible to ignore. It felt like a door opening at exactly the moment I needed one. Around the same time, while sorting through my late husband's papers, I discovered a letter he had written shortly before his death. In that letter, Daniel urged me to stop waiting for our children to appreciate me. He told me to live my life. He told me to go to Sicily. He told me to stop shrinking myself for people who no longer saw me clearly. I cried for the first time in years. That night I made my decision. Meanwhile, my family continued planning Mother's Day dinner without knowing any of this. My daughter-in-law Brooke reserved a private dining room at the restaurant Daniel and I had founded. Ironically, the room carried my name. She had no idea. She thought it was named after some investor from the distant past. The day before Mother's Day, I attended a brunch at Brooke House. During the meal, she casually joked that I had probably never eaten in a place as nice as the restaurant they had chosen. Several women at the table looked uncomfortable. One woman nearly choked on her drink because she knew exactly who I was. I simply smiled. Brooke mistook my silence for weakness. The next day, I packed my suitcase, folded away a treasured family apron, and prepared for my flight. Before leaving, I worked with Anthony to arrange one final surprise, a letter. A very special letter that would be delivered to my family after dinner. Mother's Day arrived. The family gathered in the private dining room. Brooke sat proudly at the head of the table. Megan laughed with friends, Ryan relaxed in his chair. Everyone assumed I would arrive eventually. Instead, I was on my way to the airport. As they enjoyed expensive wine and multiple courses, conversations turned toward me. Some joked about my absence, others dismissed my decision to travel. Brooke even repeated her favorite insult, saying I had probably never experienced a restaurant this sophisticated. What happened next changed the mood instantly. My grandson Ethan had noticed something hanging on the wall, a framed photograph. It showed me standing beside one of the most famous chefs in America decades earlier. He quietly pointed it out to the table. The room fell silent. Before anyone could process what they were seeing, the restaurant manager arrived carrying a leather folder. Inside was the bill, more than $3,000. At the bottom was a note explaining that the credit card normally kept on file had been removed at my request. For the first time all evening, nobody smiled. Brooke insisted there had to be a mistake. Ryan demanded answers. Megan looked confused. Then the manager opened the sealed envelope. The entire restaurant grew quiet as he began reading my letter aloud. In the letter, I reminded my children where they were sitting. The room carried my name. The restaurant existed because their father and I built it. The dishes they had ordered came from recipes I created. The glasses they drank from had been selected during buying trips I personally made years earlier. Then came the real surprise. I revealed that I was on a plane to Sicily. I announced my upcoming Lifetime Achievement Award. I explained that I had sold my ownership stake, and that the proceeds would fund scholarships for young immigrant chefs pursuing culinary careers. The room sat frozen. No one had known, no one had asked. When the letter ended, Anthony walked into the dining room himself. He confirmed every word. He explained my role in building the restaurant and described how much I had contributed to the culinary community over the years. Then he asked one devastating question. Did she never tell you? The silence that followed was unforgettable. One by one, longtime customers approached the table. They shared stories my children had never heard. Stories about meals I had provided for grieving families. Stories about people I helped when they were sick. Stories about kindness I had shown without expecting recognition. My children looked like strangers hearing about another person entirely. Then reality arrived. The bill still needed to be paid. Several credit cards were declined. More awkward silence followed. Eventually someone else covered the check. By then, the humiliation was complete. My grandson Ethan was the only one who seemed different. He had been recording parts of the evening on his phone. Unlike everyone else, he listened carefully. He paid attention, he understood what had happened. Later that night, he uploaded a video with a simple caption. My grandmother, did she never tell you? The video exploded online. Millions of people watched it within days. Meanwhile, I landed in Sicily. The warm Mediterranean air greeted me as I stepped out of the airport. For the first time in years, I felt light, I felt free. My cousin met me outside and drove me through winding roads to a small stone house waiting for me. There was a lemon tree in the courtyard exactly as Daniel had described in his letter. When I walked inside, I unpacked my suitcase and carefully unfolded my old red apron. For a moment I simply stood there. I was no longer the woman paying everyone bills while being ignored. I was no longer the woman apologizing for taking up space. I was no longer waiting for appreciation that might never come. I was finally living my own life. Months later, my grandson enrolled in culinary school. I helped pay his tuition because he was the only person in the family who cared enough to learn who I really was. My children tried reaching out, but some wounds take time to heal. At 71 years old, I learned something important. People can only take you for granted if you keep volunteering to disappear. For decades, I made myself smaller so everyone else could feel bigger. The moment I stopped doing that, everything changed. And as I stood in that kitchen in Sicily, surrounded by sunlight, old recipes, and the memories of the man I loved, I finally understood what freedom felt like. My name had never disappeared. The people around me had simply stopped reading it.